Claire in particular and Sussex LRC, who, as she said, have made it their business to put decriminalisation and sex workers at the forefront, which is we're delighted with. And we wanted to start by just saying that we all gathered around at our Women's Centre today to watch John McDonnell's fantastic speech, and we're delighted that he is calling for an economy that starts with people's needs and, of course, is against austerity. And we have been swimming against the tide since 1975, and as John has been saying, they have been swimming against it a lot too, and that he has always supported us since the early 1980s and has been with us the whole way, and we appreciate that very, very much. He's a dear friend. Crucially, John McDonnell starts with people at the bottom, and this is our starting point, including ourselves and all of us at the bottom, because what's happening to sex workers is happening to lots of us, and it's just one of the manifestations of the economic crisis. As most of you know, it's women that bear the brunt of austerity and cuts. And just one key statistic is that 70% of sex workers are mothers, mostly single mothers, and that since austerity in some areas, 61%, there's been an increase of prostitution of 61%, and 40% of those women are there through benefit cuts and sanctions, which is a disgrace. And in other areas, there are hundreds of women working on the street. It's a disgrace. Austerity is a totally sexist policy, which we've been organising against during this government, but also during the last government, since Tony Blair, and before then, in fact. We are workers like other workers, and internationally, Katie and Matt both mentioned the international. Internationally, the choice for us is the sweatshop, domestic work, or prostitution. And prostitution is really the major way to avoid sweatshops, which is the biggest employer of women, and is the thing really that they see and want for all of us. Now, criminalisation is a major obstacle for sex workers, garment workers, domestic workers, and all other workers to get together versus exploitation in our industries. And that's why we are organising with other women's organisations. For example, at the Crossroads Women's Centre, where we're based, we organise with Black Women's Rape Action Project and Women Against Rape. We organise with Invisible, Women with Disabilities, against benefit cuts and sanctions, a Women of Colour group against police abuse and harassment, the All African Women's Group against deliberate destitution, and the Global Women's Strike, whose founder and also our first spokeswoman is here, Salma Jane, on a living wage internationally for all workers, but including mothers and other carers. Because women in our network say, if we had the money, a living wage for caring, the work that we're already doing, we wouldn't need to go into prostitution to feed our children. And there are all kinds of ways in which our survival is criminalised. There's more women in prison now than ever before. Some of those reasons are the antisocial behaviour orders targeting sex workers for loitering and soliciting can mean up to 5 years in prison, and brothel keeping legislation, which is mostly 2 women working together for safety from premises, you can face up to 7 years in prison. It's disgusting. And we are criminalised workers, which means working harder for less money. And we also face saturation policing without protection, and as trade unionists know from their history and are faced with the trade union bill, is that criminalisation. We've had a massive boost to our campaign recently. You may have seen in the press that Amnesty International voted for decriminalisation. Yes. Crucially for decriminalisation in our defence, and it included a government review of the laws, but also crucially to provide resources so that sex workers could leave prostitution if they wanted to. They took their lead from the sex worker movement internationally. We just want to finish to say that we do want decriminalisation as they have introduced in New Zealand, as Claire said, in 2003. Crucially, we want it so that we can work together collectively and that the power is out of the bosses and in our hands. And we encourage you to sign our pledge and also our petition for a living wage for all workers, including mothers and other carers. Thank you.
Thanks to Laura. I will just add, and some of you would have heard me say this before, please go back and find out where your MP stands on the question of criminalisation. You might be surprised where they stand. For example, we always give this example because we are Sussex LRC and a lot of us are actually based here in Brighton. A lot of people think Caroline Lucas is a progressive MP. She's actually one of the leaders of the criminalisation lobby in Parliament. And if any of you are constituents in Brighton Pavilion and you're sympathetic to what Laura says and you believe that sex workers' clients shouldn't be criminalised because that only leads to worse safety and more risk of sex workers, please tell your MP Caroline Lucas that's what you think and ask her to change her mind and stop lobbying for the criminalisation of clients. Because the MPs that do lobby for the criminalisation of clients are only doing that as a proxy. What they really want is to criminalise sex workers.